Is mine thumbs up? That's good. Brandon, how's it going today, sir?
Doing good, doing good. Nice to
Good,
see
good. When you all get a chance, do me a favor, put your cameras on. We have some conversations that we're going to have tonight. And then more importantly, I'm going to get jumped right on into our talk for this evening. Make sure that you have all your questions prepared that I let you have some time last week to look through some of the materials, the syllabus, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So please feel free to get your questions ready towards the end of class. I know we probably won't go to the full extent of class tonight because I do want to give you some opportunities to knock out some of the work that's before you, but making sure that I answer any question that you might have. But tonight, I want to start with this presentation. And the presentation, and I am recording, yep, and the presentation is our introduction in so many ways. Thumbs up if you can see my screen with the presentation. Terrific. Awesome. First, let me say this before I even start my presentation for tonight. I was really impressed by so many of your initial discussions. If you came to the discussion, you have feedback, please make sure you always return to the feedback to learner on Blackboard right under the grade. There should be copious notes about your outputs, ranging from person first language to grammar to blows and grows. And so everybody gets comments. Everybody gets a lot of comments. I like to make sure that I'm super clear, especially in this kind of class where I don't get to physically be in your space. I try to make it as clear and as abundantly transparent as possible, the way I grade, how I grade, what I grade. So before I even begin, I want to bring up a very important topic. And I wasn't going to, but I think it just, especially after reading some of your works, and I'm not expecting anybody to get special education perfectly right, even in the next, weeks that we're together. But I do want to underscore this thing about person first language. And so, person first language is widely accepted in the disability world or the world of disability, keeping that person first language idea in the forefront of our minds. And so, we put the person first. There are some communities in specifically like some autism communities that they prefer to be identified by their disabilities first. But generally speaking, and until you get permission, you really should have person first language in the forefront of your mind. And so it's not the, autistic child, it's the child with autism. It's not the, wheelchair bound boy. It's the boy in the wheelchair. You see how you put the person first? And so make sure that as you all write and think about special education, especially in this space, you might say some things that are seemingly insensitive. And I know that it's not like you woke up in the morning and said, how can I like be insensitive to this particular population? But as things come up, I'm going to be giving you some tidbits and some ideas. And so you all can Google person first language. But this is recorded. And I will say this too. Because this class is hours long, sometimes it takes a long time for these videos to be compressed. And so within 24 hours, you'll definitely get this video. And so you can go back, check it out, look at it, do whatever you need to. Okay, so I picked that off. I'll be going through the course materials later on because you have two pending assignments that are kind of staggered. And so I want to answer any questions about that. But I also want to talk about the term paper. There's only really one term paper in this class, and it's coming up in about 2 weeks. And it's where you pick any special education law case. Sometimes folks do Brown versus the Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas case. I'm not averse to that, but because it does talk about equity. But my expectation is that you find a special education law case, and there are plenty of SPED law cases. And essentially, the directions are that you read the law case, you do a deep analysis, and then there's other things that you do with it. But I'll talk about that later on tonight. I want to jump right into special education. And this is our real first session, I guess, because last week we just kind of did like icebreakers and syllabus stuff. So tonight, and we're not going to get through this whole presentation, and I will share this presentation at the end of all of it. This probably is going to be like a 3-session presentation. And so I'll be asking you some questions. You'll be chatting in the chat box and all that other good stuff. But this presentation is all about service delivery, accommodations, and classroom support. So I wanted to reiterate this idea. When you're a special education teacher, you're not just, it's not like being a general education teacher. So like say if you're an ELA teacher or a math teacher or a science teacher, you are responsible for the general curricula and teaching that. When you're a special education teacher, 9 times out of 10, you are responsible for specially designed instruction, push in, pull out services, and we'll talk all about that tonight. And also, you're responsible for managing cases. So typically, a school will give you 10 to 15. I've had a lot more cases of students where you follow the student and you help do testing, you help do reevaluations, you look at their individualized education program. And you make adjustments, you hold the meetings, you calendar the items. And so you really are doing 2 jobs. You're not just teaching, but you're also a case manager. And so tonight we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like a little bit more. But the big thing that I really want to get out of this conversation is service delivery and probably a little bit of accommodations. So let's get started. And do me a favor. Oh, I should have, hold on, let me stop share. I got to make sure that you all get each other's phone numbers some kind of way, shape, or form. And so in the next, I'll make sure that on Blackboard, you'll have each other like a space that you can optionally, you don't have to. It's not like it's not worth a grade. And sometimes people are funny about giving out their phone numbers and stuff like that. And I don't mind. I mean, I don't care. You can do whatever you want to do. But the point is, sometimes it's helpful when you have a peer's phone number. You can text them and say, hey, tell Wallace to let me in the Zoom because he's too much into this and not into like the whatever. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a one-trick pony. I'm presenting. That's all I got. I don't do I can't manage technology and stuff like that. I had a student was like, I'm having trouble with my Duo, like getting on, like, when you type into the Montgomery College and you have to click the thing on your phone and da-da-da. I have no idea what y'all are doing on that end. So you have to call IT. I'm not IT. I'm Dr. Brandon Wallace. I'm an educator. What is it called? An educational mastermind. Let's just say mastermind. But no, when it comes to technology, I don't pay attention to the chat box and until I need to, right? And so it's really good for y'all to have each other's phone numbers, especially if you need some support or, peer-to-peer guidance or stuff like that. And so I'll make sure I'll put a mental note, because I'm not that, well, no, let me write it down because I am no. I'll put a mental note to put something on Blackboard about your name and phone number and stuff like that, just in case y'all want to get in contact with each other. And I've had other classes do group chats, put you all into one big text message string or whatever. Again, don't ask me how to do that, but I will tell you this funny story. I have to move on with the presentation. Long story short, I was teaching a class one time. And I said to this is a real story, but I'm just going to use y'all names to make it less judgmental. So I was like, hey, Imani, we're going to do a group chat. So everybody text Imani and then she'll start the group chat and then y'all just have this group chat going on, right? And so the next time I had the class, I said, so how's this group chat going? Half of the class, maybe 40% of the class, which is like half the class. Let's just make sure this is not a student. Nope. Okay, good. Half the class was like, we didn't get any text message. And so I was like, Imani, I mean, these are simple directions. It's not like a paper. I'm asking you to text your peers. And so Imani, this has never happened because I don't even know y'all. I'm just making this the name so I don't mess up and say the real student's name. So I said, Imani, what is going on? Why didn't you create the text message like Dr. Wells asked you to? Imani said, no, I did. So she holds up her phone and I see the text message. And I said, well, all right, wait, we got to get to the bottom of this because you saying that you did more than some of the class is saying that you didn't. And so Imani said, oh, no. I didn't put the androids on the phone. I didn't put them into the group. I lost it. I lost my ish on camera. I said, Imani, lost your mind. This is not discriminatory practices. You have to add everybody. And then I found out that, and I'm an Android person. I found out that there was like a light, like a green or a blue or a red light that if you're not, I said, you lost your mind. I said, Imani's lost her mind. And I apologize. And so I said, Brandon, do you have a Android? Brandon said, I have an Android. I said, send your stuff to Brandon and we're all going to get onto the same tech. So I don't know what this Apple Android war is, but all I know is if Dr. Wallace asked you to create a group chat, that means everybody has to go in the group chat. Everybody. Let me see you do this for me so that y'all know what I'm talking about. Okay, good. All right. So here we go. I've been doing this way too long. I almost quit that day, but I kept courage. I kept on going. All right, thumbs up again if you can see my introduction. All right, great. So I'm a professor in the School of Education. Just to reiterate who I am, because we did the first night, and I think that everybody, maybe one person wasn't here. Professor in the School of Education, Montgomery College. I used to do program coordination for Coordinated Early Intervening Services, CEIS, and that was in Prince George's County Public Schools. I still am a faculty associate at Johns Hopkins University, where I teach classes in behaviorism, special education, ELA stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I actually will be at Hopkins this Saturday. And if you're in Baltimore, email me and I'll invite you. It's like a little open house for students and there's free food. So if you're in the Baltimore area, come up. They've invited me to do a talk around mentorship and education. I'm really excited to be interviewed and I also, again, I talked to y'all about my involvement on national assessments. So one of the national assessments a couple of them that I was on is the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness of College and Career PARC. And I did a lot of accessibility, accommodations, and fairness work there. I've been on the Reading Standing Committee for the National Assessment for Educational Progress, the National Report Card, for 6 years. I left that. But my lens was specifically for special populations. How do they take tests? What does accessibility look like for them? One of my most recent pieces was published with Dr. Yolanda Abel from Johns Hopkins University. It was released last year, and it was entitled Embracing Artificial Intelligence Tools to Enrich Special Education Teacher Preparation. That's the book. That's the citation. I used to be, I don't know, this fell off, but I was the former National Director of Specialized Education at Urban Teachers. And Urban Teachers is a teacher preparation program in multiple cities throughout the country. And then I really got my big start in compliance when I was at the Office of the State Superintendent of Education, OSSE, which is a state education agency for the District of Columbia. And so I've done a lot in special education. It's one of my big things that I love to do. And so I just wanted to kind of share with you my mental model of I'm not no slouch and you're in good hands. So I want to, when we think about service delivery and accommodations in particular, I really want you to take turns and do all this. And we'll start with Brandon and we'll go to Imani, Teresa, and Kelsey. But tell me your name, especially because I want to make sure I'm pronouncing it right. Tell me your name. What's something that you want to get from today's session? And then using only one word, describe your overall impression of special education. We'll start with Brandon. I know how to pronounce that name for sure, because that's my name.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, so my name is Brandon, as y'all know. Well, I was reviewing and I was like service delivery. I was thinking Amazon, but but I'm guessing service delivery is like how we serve the students.
You got it.
So I'm trying to, I guess I'm ready to learn how we can serve them, and also accommodate I guess they work hand in hand. Um,
Sometimes they do.
and I guess what was the other question? Am I missing anything?
And nope, using only one word, describe your overall impression of special education.
What's one word? Say, um, man, that's a hard one. I would say, I have one in my head, but I don't know why it's not trying to come out. I would say you have to be the one word, man, what's the word? I don't want to say precise, but there's another word. I don't know why I can't think of it in my
I'll
head.
take it. I'll take precise for right now. And if you do come up with another word, just throw it in the chat box.
I'll throw it out there.
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
Uh, thank you so much, Brandon. Imani. Faith.
I love that you know that. Okay, I'm sorry.
Of
Yeah, so you pronounced it right. It is Imani. Um, what's something that you want to get from today's session? I would just like to know a little bit more about what counts as an accommodation, I guess you
Mhm.
could say. I am thinking specifically of a short video somebody showed me a while ago where it was a child, an ESOL learner, struggling with math. They were very good at math, but they could not understand the questions. And so I remember in the video, the teacher trying to go and get like a special math packet for them that was in Spanish. And one of the teachers saying, that's not allowed. So kind of just figuring out like what counts as kind of like an accommodation versus special treatment, I would say, which I
Yeah.
don't really believe in. But I would like to kind of know how that process goes. And then using only one word, I would honestly say complicated.
It is very good. Very good. I appreciate the transparency. It is complicated, and we will actually get into the conversation accommodations versus modifications tonight, and so we'll definitely talk about that. And I got a little trick for you too. There's an easy way to remember the difference between accommodations and modifications, and I'll share that with you later on tonight. Thank you so much, and Teresa.
Okay, hi. So my name's Teresa Jara, and something that I would like to get from this section will be, this is my question. Okay, so for an IP meeting, the parents are the ones that has to request. Then they send like the information, the questions to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician will send the Vanderbilt form. Okay. I don't want to sound bad. I'm so sorry, Professor.
No, you're
But
fine.
how we are how we are how how we are sure that when the IP meeting is set up and everything, and they determine if they need the accommodations for the IP meetings and for all staff to get the service for special education, how we really know that, because sometimes they say no, this student don't qualify, they don't have, but then actually later on in life, like when they are in middle school, high school, they get finally the diagnostic and they get the IP accommodation. So that's one question. And to describe the impression of special education will be community for me.
Nice, nice. So you said a lot of stuff, and I'm going to try to unpack a few of the things throughout the course of the class. You'll get a lot more information, but I will say this: there's a difference, and I said this last week, but I wasn't recording, so I'm going to record. Say it now. There's a difference between Part B and Part C in special education, and so for Part B, that's more like K through 12. Part C is more early childhood because Part C is essentially infants. And so essentially what you're saying, Teresa, is you're bringing up this concept of child find, child find. So child find means that anybody who is associated with the child in a learning capacity of some sort has the opportunity to say, I want my child tested. pediatrician can do it, and when you're older, a special education, administrator, somebody at the school level, they can do it, stuff like that or whatever. I say all that to say, once the pediatrician, does it, says like this child can qualify for, services. What ends up happening is that it creates a timeline. It creates a very strict timeline. And the strict timeline says that the school has to respond to the pediatrician and the parents and stuff like that. I want to say a few things too. The parents aren't the only people that can call an IEP meeting. And actually in part C, it's called an IFSP meeting, an individualized family service plan. And so a program. Well, depending on where you are. And again, I know that sometimes in this class, we call them individualized education programs because that's what IDEA says that they are. But in different places, you'll hear plan, you'll hear program. I like the idea of sticking with what the law says. So there's that. I will say all that to say, if parents can say that they don't want their kids tested, parents can say they don't want to have their child receive services. Parents can say a lot of things. However, it's called a team meeting. And so you're supposed to bring a lot of people at the table to have this discussion because you're really supposed to be doing what's in the best interest of the child. And so we're going to get to a lot of the other things that you talked about, but I heard a lot of great ideas that came from you, especially when it comes to, the who, the what, the when, the where, the why. It is very complicated, like Imani said. But to your point, Teresa, if you have a strong community that really wants to do right by the kid or kids, you can do some amazing, fantastic things. For kids that young, oftentimes you see the DD, developmental delay. You see that kind of designation of a disability on a child. And there's a lot of things that you can do to help kids meet goals so that those IEPs, IFSPs are not lifelong sentences. Special education is not intended to be a lifelong sentence. There are some students that need individualized education programs, plans for their entire educational life. And then they get adult ADA accommodations too. That is all to say, you can make children ineligible for services once they successfully meet the goal. Now, there's a lot of conversation around why, when, what, etc. Sometimes people get really into the vulgarity of it, and the vulgarity is that yes, if you have a student with disabilities, you get bigger per pupil spending, and then that kind of does a lot of other things in special education. But we will talk a lot about everything that you shared throughout the semester. And tonight you'll really want to hear about this idea around service delivery and accommodations, especially because if your school cannot service a child, you probably aren't the best educational setting for that child. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But you do want to keep children with their typically aged peers as best and as much as you can. However, sometimes that's not possible. So you said a lot, but we're going to get to a lot of that throughout the semester. So good job for the question. And I want to say this too. If you all are at your jobs or if you're in different positions and you have a burning question that might not be able to wait until April or May, email me your specific question and I will give you some guidance and advice. I'll give you some guidance and advice as the semester goes, because I don't want you to have to wait, especially if you have a child who is in dire need for some really good care. I'm an advocate in so many ways. I was an advocate for a lot of my family members. And so please feel free to email me offline if I'm not getting to the topic fast enough. We will cover a lot of topics in this class, but I understand that some things can't wait. So feel free to send me a private email and I'll make sure that I respond to your email quickly so that you can have something to go into an IEP meeting or go into an IFSP meeting. Kelsey.
Hi, yeah, my name is Kelsey. So something that I would like to get from today's session is kind of like Imani said, understand like accommodation versus modification, and also understand what service delivery is.
Mhm.
One word to describe my overall impression of special education would be diverse. So yeah.
Yep. Excellent. All right. We're already 30 minutes into class. We ain't do nothing yet. So let's get to it. And plus, I do want to make sure that I try to give you some time of my class time to do a little bit of the work that is before you. So here are some of the outcomes. Here are some of the outputs. Here are some of the objectives. Explain some of the core principles of UDL. We probably won't get to that tonight. But again, this is a long presentation, and we're going to break it up into probably 2 or 3 sessions. We're going to describe what service delivery is and how it shapes expectations, distinguish between accommodations and modifications. We'll talk about applying universal design for learning principles to design lessons that include multiple means of engagement, action and expression, representation, analyze classroom tasks, plan specific accommodations, and reflect on current instructional practices. Don't forget, this is being recorded. So even if you miss a slide, you can always go back to the recording and check it out. So whatever your why is, whether it's compliance, whether it's equity, whether it's litigation, whether it's general information, whether this is a refresher, or whether you want to make sure I'm responsible for doing these things, I want to make sure I'm doing it right, especially because sometimes we have administrators or just co-teachers or teachers who try to push off their responsibilities on you, which isn't right and which isn't fair. And so sometimes you really need to know, what am I responsible for and what is the other person responsible for, or even what the system is responsible for. And so today we'll talk a little bit about every one of these things, and we can't start the conversation without talking about the Council for Exceptional Children. The Council for Exceptional Children, CEC, is the overarching big organization that supports exceptional children, children with disabilities, and children who need specially designed instruction, who are legally entitled to specially designed instruction. And so if you ever get a chance to, especially if you want to dig deep into this, you should become a member of the Council for Exceptional Children. Check out their website. Their membership has a lot of goodies, a lot of resources, conferences that you can meet different people, you can learn different topics, and the whole nine. But this is what CEC says is special education. Special education is an integral part of the total educational enterprise, not a separate order. It's supposed to be a part of the educational enterprise. In any school system, special education is a means of enlarging the capacity of the system to serve the educational needs of all children. So now that we have what the big council says, we're going to find out what the law says. And so IDEA says that special education means specially designed instruction. That's really what special education is. All about specially designed instruction that happens either in the classroom, the home, hospitals, institutions, and other settings. And you have something called physical education. And under that, we talk about adaptive physical education. There is no excuse. I'm going to say this with boldness and out of my chest. There's no excuse why a child with a disability cannot be a participant in their educational experience, an active participant in their educational experiences. I've seen kids who are nonverbal. I've seen kids who had to use head switches. I've seen kids in every single space that you can think of. Every child can participate in their educational experience. Because when you specially design instruction, you are appropriately adapting the content, the methodology, or the delivery of instruction to meet the diverse learning needs and styles of students with disabilities. So here are all the disability categories. The federal government has identified 13 big buckets. Again, and inside of those big buckets are disorders. And so, for instance, if you look at specific learning disability, under specific learning disability is like dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia. And so a lot of disorders are nested under these big umbrellas. And so I want you to spend some time looking at these disability categories, because you're going to be doing some specific work later on in the semester. So you essentially are going to have to choose one of the disability categories that you either want to gain more information about, or for different reasons. So sometimes students pick a specific disability category because they might have a family or a relative a family member or a relative who was diagnosed with one of these disabilities. Other times you keep on hearing about autism, or you keep on hearing about TBI, traumatic brain injury. And that's one of my big areas of interest, because I've always been drawn to people who were not born with a disability, but essentially acquire a disability, if you will. And so I'm thinking about people who go into car accidents and they have to use different tools after that accident. Or sometimes their IQ is this, and then because an accident of some sort, they have numbers that deviate from their original number to lesser numbers. And so even blindness, there's a lot of people who, as the years go on, their eyesight decreases and they need different technologies to help them with their eyesight. Hearing is the same way. And so as you think about what disability category you want to focus in on, just know that there's only 13, and it's okay to focus in on a disorder like dyscalculia or dysgraphia, but you have to talk about specific learning disability first. And specific learning disability is a huge bucket. And so that's just the IDEA disability categories. So there's a lot of laws and there's a lot of rules. If you ever wanted to look up all the laws, which is helpful, you just Google IDEA 2004, and that's the federal guidance. That's the federal law around students with disabilities and people with students with disabilities, learners with disabilities, especially in the K through under 12 system. I say all that to say, the Individuals with Disability Education Improvement Act is a law that grew from another law, which grew from another law. But to make a really long story short, it's been over 20 years since that law has been revised, revamped, and we desperately need it to be revised and revamped. And so anytime you hear or see public opportunities to speak out on how can we get this law refreshed, please do so, because it is in dire need of revision. So when I say service delivery, what do I mean? I mean direct instructional support. I mean behavioral support. I mean data collection. I mean accommodations and modifications, implementation, communication support, and independence building. All of these bullets fall under service delivery. And so to your point, Brandon, not like Amazon, but it is service that you have to deliver under these domains. So whether it's direct instructional support, data collection, these are all services that we give to students with disabilities for the betterment of their prayerfully, hopefully, strategically, empathically, then meeting their goals. And so that's the big thing. And don't forget, I'm recording this, and then you can take pictures and do whatever you want to, because it's your information. So there are different types of service delivery modules or service delivery, service delivery opportunities. Let's say opportunities. So what happens with service delivery? First, you're supporting access to grade level content. You want to avoid over prompting. You want to prevent learned helplessness, because they have to do it. They have to do it. They're doing it with your support, but they have to do it. It can't be you giving them the answers. It can't be you giving them a cookie and trying to bribe them to do something. They have to do it. And then you want to make sure that you strategically fade the support. And that's that big word that we know in education called scaffolding. So scaffolding is essentially, and think about a scaffold of a building. You ever see those buildings where you have there's construction going on and there's a scaffold, like that metal kind of construction that's attached to the building? That metal thing where the people go and work on bricks or work on pipes or whatever, that doesn't stay a part of the building forever. That's once the problem is fixed, the scaffold comes away, and then you do another building, And so think of service delivery, especially in special education, as that key construct of scaffolding. What you're doing is you're giving enough supports at an appropriate measure, an appropriate time, et cetera, as the IEP dictates. And then little by little, you start to, back away from the supports that you're giving students primarily because they need to be independent. They need to be independent thinkers, independent learners, independent writers, independent mathematicians. They have to be independent in the work. And so there are two big types of service delivery services. So there's push in and then there's pull out. Push, and you'll hear this a lot in elementary, like in schools. And so I try to keep this accessible to what you're probably going to experience. Because again, you'll probably deal with more mild or moderate students with disabilities. You probably won't go into severe or profound students with disabilities. And if you are with severe or profound students with disabilities spaces, please feel free to reach out and I can modify some of this content. But this is probably mostly what y'all will experience. So there's push-in services. And so what does that look like? It looks like essentially what it sounds like. You are pushing in to specific classrooms, specific class spaces, specific learning spaces, and you are giving specially designed instruction to students. You are making sure that you are part of the classroom culture. Again, just like the CEC says, you're not an add-on. You're not an add-on. You're integral into the educational enterprise of a school. So the students and the teachers, you should not be, only working with the student with disability. Number one, because you shouldn't ostracize students and you shouldn't make it seem like, only one child needs help. You really should be supporting that student or the student who you're supposed to be supporting, who is legally required to have those specially designed instructional opportunities. But also, it's your responsibility to go around and to help monitor and to help reteach, retool, underscore things that the teacher might have missed, really exude practice, instructional practice into the work that you're doing. And so that's the push in. It typically happens in general education. The general education and the teacher and the special education teacher really should be working together in a co-teaching atmosphere where it doesn't even look like one is the general education teacher and the other one is a special education teacher. It really should look like a beautiful partnership, a beautiful marriage of two people working together for the betterment of all the children, particularly those kids with who are in need of specially designed instruction. When you start thinking about pull-out services, so essentially you are doing just what it says. You're pulling students out of the classroom environment and you're taking them to a safe space, maybe a library or a welcoming office, not a closed door office. You want to make sure that it's, there's other chairs and other, nice things in a nice open space of sorts. But you're making sure that you are intensely and instinctively doing what that child needs in terms of specially designed instruction also. And so the benefit of push in is that you can help a lot of kids. The benefit of pull out is that you're helping 2 or 3 children at the same time, and you're working on things that are barriers to their learning or to their, them accessing the general education curricula. And so again, there's a lot of different, versions of this, but these are the 2 that you're probably most going to be associated with. Any big questions before I move on? And I'll also take questions at the end too. So there are a lot of service delivery models. So there's pull out resource, where you get a chance to model, demonstrate, explain specific skills. There's targeted skill interventions, but you really want to make sure that you have a clear instructional objective with everything you're doing with a child. It has to be very clear instructional objective. You just don't take kids out and play with them. You just don't take kids out and work on their home assignments. You have to have a very clear instructional objective. We worked on this. This is our objective. And did we meet the objective or not? And you should be able to say that after each session. You want to maintain the connection to the core instruction. So all that is with pull out and resource. Inclusion and push-in model, you really want to support access to grade level content. You want to avoid over prompting. You want to make sure that you are not contributing to learn helplessness, because too often times we have a lot of special educators who think that they're being nice, right? They think that they're being nice and they'll give the kid the answer or won't let them wait. They don't let them have what we call wait time of what's 2 + 2? Just give it a second. Let them think. Let their processes happen. And then start giving them scaffolds. Don't just give them the answer. That's the most prompt you can do for a child. You know, put 2 pennies here and then put 2 pennies here and say, how many pennies? Like, really try to make it. And we'll talk about universal design for learning. You can think about the multiple means of representation, but it's not about giving kids answers. And you're not being mean if you don't give kids answers. I see this happening way too much. Especially in special education spaces. I really believe that students with disabilities have to work even harder, unfortunately, because they have to catch up. And they have to learn different ways to process information. They have to learn how to uniquely learn outside of this, square box. And so it's really our responsibility to stay on the cutting edge of specially designed instruction, what we're supposed to be doing in terms of scaffolding, and also making sure that you strategically fade support. When do you know when it's time to start fading it? When you see them getting it. And how do you know that they're getting it? Because you're progress monitoring. You're collecting data every step of the way so that you can have evidence of saying, this child is ready to move this way, or this child is ready to move that way. It can't be a gut feeling. It can't be because you're tired of talking about the same concept. It really has to be super strategic. And if you don't want to be strategic, first of all, you shouldn't be an educator. But more importantly, you can't be a special educator. If you don't want to work with strategy and empathy and specificity, education is probably not for you. And this is where I start weeding some of y'all out because education is the hardest. I really believe this. It is the hardest job that anybody has ever created in the history of occupations. It really is. And if you're not up for rolling up your sleeves and getting into the fight, you should just do something else. You should probably do something else. And I don't mean to be negative, but I really want to be realistic that there are going to be some days where, just like you said, the one word for special education, complicated, confusing, irritating, but there also ought to be joy and completion and thoughtfulness and empathy, and all these things make up education, but also it really does make up special education. All right, and now y'all probably won't get into self-contained, but I still want to talk about self-contained classroom. Raise your hands if you've heard that term before, self-contained classrooms. Self-contained classrooms is when students, their IEP says that they would do better in a more secluded environment. Now, the goal of special education is to have all students, one of the goals of special education is to have as many students as possible, to the extent possible, working with their typically aged peers. So you shouldn't have, so if you're 13, you should be working with your 13-year-old and typically aged peers in your community. Going back to Teresa's point, you don't want to ship kids to alternative special kids if you can help it, because they need to be a part of their community. They need to be a part of their ecosystem. So every time you bus a child away from the ecosystem, you're removing them from their community. And there's a lot of research and ideologies around that too. But in some schools, if you have students who cannot follow the general education curricula, then sometimes with their typically aged peers, then sometimes they are in what we call self-contained. And again, you want to prevent that to the extent possible, but sometimes students need a very private setting in their school, secluded from other peers, so that they can really deeply concentrate on the things in which they need to learn. And so when you're in a self-contained room, you have a lot of structured routines. It's intensive support. Sometimes you have communication systems like augmentative, alternative communication, gestures, picture boards. This is for students who are nonverbal, things like that. So what I mean by PECS, the picture exchange communication system, is sometimes kids are are nonverbal to the extent where you have like a little board or a little piece of paper set up for them, and you have pictures like the bathroom or the water fountain or something like that, and then they can point to the picture if they need to go to the bathroom or if they need to go to, but you have to teach kids how to use the picture exchange communication system. And there's deep trainings around that and stuff like that. And so sometimes kids' disabilities are so prominent, so prevalent that they need that type of support for communication. And there's other things like that, but I just wanted to make sure that you have a general overview of what you may be experiencing. Avoid common pitfalls when you are doing service delivery. Try not to hover over the kids. Really try to think about how can they practice this independently as best as they can. Again, oftentimes you do need to prompt children, but you want to make sure that the prompt is not as dependent, or you're starting to, make students a lot more independent in thinking and doing throughout the classroom experience. You really don't want to complete work for students. I've seen this happen way too many times. I'm like, so who do we give the grade to? Do we give the grade to Imani, or do we give the grade to the child whose name is on the piece of paper? And so again, sometimes you are going to have to do hand over hand and help kids write or do things like that or whatever. But to the extent possible, you really want to refrain from completing the work for students. And it's so important that y'all do not become behavior managers. That's not what special education is about. Special education isn't that just because Imani can work well with Brandon, we're going to make Imani Brandon special. That's not how special education is supposed to work. Does it happen? Yes. And that's not like, I'm not going to be up here lying. It does happen, but you want to make sure that there is always some type of instructional component to the work that you're doing with students, that you don't fall into the trap of solely being just like a behavior manager. So support that increases independence versus support that increases dependency. And you want to be on the side of support that increases independence. So there's a lot of different types of data collection. And this is all still around service delivery. You can take anecdotal notes on how well students are doing, how they're accomplishing their goals, et cetera, et cetera. And you have to keep notes. You have to keep notes, whether it's in a database, an Excel spreadsheet. I used to do mine on a clipboard next to the kids' names. But you need records and evidence of what you're doing and how it's benefiting the student. You want to make sure that you have, and I understand that sometimes with snow days and Ice-Mageddon that we just came through, frequency does count. So the more you do it, the better results you're going to get. It's just like exercising. If you only go to the gym once a month, don't go to the gym. Like, you're wasting your time. But if you go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week for an hour or two, you are guaranteed better results. You're guaranteed results. And so think about that. Special education is like a gym. The more you do it, the better outcomes you get. And I will say this, students are legally required to receive certain hours of service delivery. So sometimes you'll see a student who has 15 hours. Sometimes you see a student that has 20 hours. You have to give them those hours because that's your legal obligation. Now, when a kid is, say if you're sick, right? Say if the special educator is sick, those hours don't go away. You still need to make up those hours. And so that's what we call compensatory hours. So those kids in that legal document get specific amounts of hours, and your school has to make sure it happens. It's not the parents' fault. And let me say something else about special education while I'm on it. If that child needs a communication device, or if that child needs pencil grips, if that child needs technology to help with his or her disability, the school has to pay for it. The school has to pay for it. We don't have no more money, and we got to figure. No. The school has to pay for it. And the parent is not responsible to pay for those services because that's what the state gives y'all money for. And so again, I know we get into a lot of that back and forth, but it's not the parent's responsibility to buy the instructional supports that a kid needs. It's the school's responsibility. Behavior ABC data. ABC stands for antecedent behavior consequence. And so oftentimes you hear a student with disability, somebody say like, it just came out of nowhere. They just started doing this. They just started doing this. That's not true. There's always somewhere where that behavior comes from. And that's why we say the antecedent, what happened right before the behavior, and then the consequence. And the consequence isn't like what the teacher, like detention. That's not the consequence. The consequence is what immediately happened after the behavior. So for instance, say if I'm Brandon in the classroom and Imani, you say, we have a test in 5 minutes, clear your desk, da 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 da. Say that. And I'm her student.
We have a test in 5 minutes. Please clear your desks.
Shit! You're not gonna say nothing, Imani? You're just gonna let me curse? All right. So, Imani, you should say something like, watch your language, or, you know, we don't say curse words, or, you know, something like that, or whatever. Or that's, whatever, maybe you have a token system at your school, so it's a demerit or whatever, da da da.
Don't say that at school.
Say again?
We don't say that at school. That's a homework.
That's right. That's fine. That's perfect too. But you're taking data. You still have to capture that data. That's not something that you flip off, because the antecedent is, Miss Kenya said, we're about to take a test. Brandon, the student, screamed out a curse word that was disruptive and da 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 da. And then the consequences was, Miss Kenya said, we do not use that language in this classroom. And then I got myself together. You still need to document the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence, because at the IEP team meeting, you need to say, I'm noticing that every time I say we're taking a test, Brandon curses and shouts and screams and acts all belligerent, da da da. And so now you can start pinpointing that I'm having test anxiety. You see that? Because every time Miss Kenya talks about testing, I just blow up, or I start cursing, I act all out of. So it's not like, you know, Brandon just be cursing out of nowhere. No, there's something that's happening that triggers Brandon to curse. And then Miss Kenya, maybe we don't use language like that in here. Is it strong enough? And so maybe you have to do something with the consequence. You see that? Something that happens immediately right after. And so that's the type of behavior data, when I'm talking about collecting, that is a part of the service delivery that you have to do. I'm running out of time. And then make sure that you have fidelity with implementation. Fidelity is so important. You can't do stuff half-assed. And that was a real curse word from Dr. Wallace. You have to really do your best when it comes for students with disabilities. You've got to do your best. You've got to do better than has been done to them before, because we are in a space in this country, and we've traditionally been in this space in this country, primarily because special education has never been fully funded. We've never had full funding in special education. We're always lacking and lagging behind. However, because y'all are going to be the superstars that take up the mantle, it's really important that y'all say, it stops with me, especially because so many times we have, that's right. So many times we have generations of students who are in desperate need of specially designed instruction, and they're not getting it. Communication and professional collaboration, that's a part of service delivery too. You're supposed to be talking to the administration about students. You're supposed to be having some kind of professional language interaction. You make sure you give feedback, and not just give feedback to the student. Give feedback to the general education teacher, give feedback to the administrators, give feedback to everybody parents. You can give feedback to parents. I know people don't want you to talk to parents, but it's important that you talk to parents and give them feedback. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? Are they coming to school prepared? There is a reasonable expectation that students, period, come to school with a pencil, a piece of paper, clean clothes, blah, 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 blah. That's a reasonable expectation. And so make sure that you receive feedback. Give feedback, but also receive feedback. And make sure that you ask clarifying questions. If you're ever confused, send me an email or ask what we call it, your general education teacher or your special education teacher or your special education administrator. Make sure you ask clarifying questions, because what you don't want to be is you don't want to be on the side of the table where you dropped the ball and you could have prevented the dropping of the ball. Because I'm the guy from OSSI. Remember, I worked at a state education agency, and I would go to different schools all throughout DC, and I would give fines out, FINES. You would have to pay money to make these kids whole. And no school wants to lose $15,000, $20,000 in a visit with Dr. Wiles. No school wants to take me to court. No school wants that kind of drama. But I don't care whose fault it was. If a parent is saying they're not giving my child services or this or that or whatever, I'm going to do an investigation. And I don't care, Imani, if it's your first year, that's your problem. Brandon, if you were tired that day and tired for the whole quarter and you couldn't do this, and you couldn't, that's not my problem. I'm here with the clipboard. I'm getting y'all in trouble today. That's my job. And so again, the excuse of I didn't know isn't good enough. It's never good enough, especially in a court of law, because as you will see in the court cases that y'all will be reviewing, judges literally almost always, they typically go on the side of the child. How can it be this child's problem that you didn't show up for work for 4 weeks? How can it be this child? Like, that's not the kid's issue. But we'll talk about that too in a little bit. I got to keep on going. I can't believe it's like almost cultural responsiveness and equity in service delivery. This is very important. As Skiba et al., the first big piece that I asked you all to read in this class, it underscores disproportionality in special education. A lot of the kids in special education look just like me. And many of them should not be there because there's nothing cognitively wrong with these kids. They might not be the best disciplined children, but oftentimes they use discrepancy tests as punishment. And so making sure that you really engage in multi-tiered systems of support, response to intervention, and I'll talk about this probably next week or the week afterwards, making sure that you're strategic and systematic about how you collect data, the children that you think should get services and the children that you think should not get services. Some of the kids just need enrichment. Some of the kids just need to sit down. Some of the kids just need to sit down. Like, we're not playing that game today. Again, I know y'all think that you're so mean if you just tell kids you're disciplined. Discipline is not the enemy of education. Trust me. Discipline is the safe space. Most kids want that sphere of protection where they feel safe, they feel disciplined, they feel like it's orderly, that they don't have to be looking left and right for somebody. They want guidance, clean, clear guidance. And so make sure that you are enacting those dispositions, especially in special education settings. You want to make sure that you avoid over surveillance of students of color, and you want to make sure that you are well informed of trauma-informed practices and approaches. There's some students, and I don't want to pretend like every child has trauma, but there are some students that come from traumatic backgrounds. And you have to be thoughtful about that because you never know what that child is experiencing or what that family has experienced, especially right now. In this climate of, I don't know, the sick, disgusting, weird climate that we're in, especially when we have people we're in a very confusing space for children and teachers. And so, for instance, and I'm gonna keep it real. That's all I know how to do, y'all. I'm sorry. When you see that there are people that come to the rescue and the support of pedophiles, when you see that happening and you know you've been a victim, it makes telling not so easy. Because again, if you see that all these other people are getting away with hurting children, what's gonna happen to me? And I'm not powerful, I'm not a billionaire, I'm not on some island, but you see this ridiculous, disgusting culture where kids are not protected. Like we say that we want to, right? We always, we love kids and we love education, but you start to question, can I come forward? Especially if I don't read that well, but I don't think that this teacher's supposed to be doing this. It's like very, very difficult, I believe, for children now to come forward with any type of difference or difficulty, primarily because you just don't know how you're going to be received. There used to be a time, I believe, where we took a lot of that stuff serious, and it was no nonsense. especially in the systems where I was in. I told you I was in Baltimore City for a decade. I was in Montgomery County. I taught at Wheaton. I can't imagine the foolishness that's happening in this space right now. But I also will say, just be mindful about trauma-informed approaches so that students who may be experiencing trauma, they get the support and the help that they need, that listening ear. And I understand that y'all gonna be tired. I understand that y'all gonna go through a whole day of work and you don't want to hear another student complaint. You don't want to help another note. You just want to get home. That's not your job. Your job is to hear the complaint. Your job is to act as a mandatory reporter. Your job is to act in the best interest of children. Your responsibility is to make sure you understand child find and how it works and how you shouldn't enact testing a student with this for disabilities until you've done a very rich battery of instructional methodologies, including response to intervention, which was response to instruction, and multi-tiered systems of support. So, hearing all of this, I want you to, I'm not going to be able to, I'll just leave that up there. Hearing all of this in the chat box or out loud, I want you to answer, what is one shift you will make in your daily practice if you are a teacher or when you become a teacher? Or where do you need more clarity from your supervising teacher vis-a-vis me? Where do you need a little bit more clarity? I want to make sure I answer, and just put it in the chat box or just shout it out. Of the things that we've already talked about, of course.
To just give students their space to express themselves. I mean, they tell us that we should provide them with 7 seconds to respond, but I've found, and this is for students that don't have special education needs, I found that they need more than they need sometimes 10 seconds.
Yep.
And you have to sit there in that silence and literally be their guard dog, because like as they're sitting there trying to answer, there's like 6 other kids like, "Ah," and you're like, "Stop, no," you're like trying to stop them from answering and holding them back. So yeah, just because when I first started teaching, I remember not having that patience. Just I could, I had a lesson. I had it just like you're here now saying you have time. This is your time, and you need to get all in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember feeling that, and just feeling like I needed to railroad over students' time. And only in my end of my second year, third year, did I realize that you really have to give them their time, because you may be grading a student as though they're lower than they're performing, simply because they just are approaching it through a cultural lens, or approaching it through a diverse lens that the majority of students are not in the country are not dealing with.
That's very good. And I will say also about cognitive processing. Cognitive processing is different for everybody. I have two people in my life who it grinds my gears that I have to wait for them to think about some of the things that I will share with them. And here's the thing, I'm talking about like, hey, what do you want for dinner? I'd be there all day. I'm like, hey, let's go. I'm driving, we about to hit my exit. But to your point, it's really important that we give that wait time. And in special education, we call it time delay. We call it time delay in special education. It's an evidence-based practice. We know it works with specific students with disabilities. And so that's a very good point. I'm going to look at my chat and see other things that you have been saying. I saw that follow through and close the loop.
I know this may just a random point, but out of all my classes that I teach, I have a student who's specifically segregated from other students in a special SES class with IEPs, you name it. But somehow that student is the one that answers the questions first before all the rest of them. That student is focused and listening. Not saying that all of them are that way,
right.
But there's one class where I do have one that is in this situation, and he is the most attentive student in the class. Actually, I think it's 2 classes now that I think about it. Just the one student has a more aggressive quality to the
Mhm.
way he presents his information, which to someone who's not came from a very sheltered or soft life, they might find that as inappropriate and this and that and this and that. But really, I think it's just his style of communication, and so, yeah, just thought I'd
And
share.
to your point about communication, I'm not, as you probably could tell, I'm not the softest communicator. But whether you think it's aggressive, whether you think it's adamant, whether you think it's whatever, adjective you want to subscribe to the ways in which I communicate, I communicate. And we have some students who struggle with appropriateness and how to communicate and when and where and why, especially. And I'm gonna blame everything on social media. When you're kind of stuck in an app and you can type whatever you think, it's often it's not the best. It's not the best. Again, I know some of y'all live for Instagram and live for all these other TikTok and stuff like that. I'm not big on it. But I will say I understand the utility of it. I get the utility of it. So I'm not like an 84,000-year-old person. Like I get what social media is. However, if you've never been taught, like for instance, when I was growing up in church, there were first of all, you learn how to sit in church. You learn how to listen to the pastor, the sermon, right? Your parents, my mother, she never let us play around in church. And their daggone sure was not no technology in church. It's different now. When the kids, I see this, and I'm not judging anyone. I'm not judging anybody. However, when I go to church now, I see a lot of kids on tablets. I see a lot of kids on their devices. And so what does that mean? They're not paying attention, right? They're not paying attention to the speaker. Their parents are allowing them to essentially be present in one space, but be mentally occupied in another space, which is super I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they do it. But they have learned how to divide their attention, unlike any other generation that I've ever seen or studied. And so it's really important that to your point, Hisham, you have to take that into consideration when it comes to students, period, but also students with disabilities, because too often times you hear some teachers say, well, when I was a child, it didn't work like that when we were kids. Like everything, so much has changed in life. And so the things that work for you to get your attention, if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, it probably is not going to work for an 11. It's probably not going to work for 13. So you have to do new ways of thinking, new ways of attention grabbing, new ways of engaging, primarily because if you don't, you're going to lose more kids, disability or no disability. Okay, so my cheat sheet on how you, and we're gonna probably take questions in about 20 minutes, and then I'll close up class and answer any questions and stuff like that. And again, if you have, I'm going to go straight through tonight. So if you have to go to the restroom, feel free to take your camera off, go to the restroom, drink your water, come back, shut your camera on, We're all adults. But don't everybody got to stay here for this because this is the cheat sheet. So the easiest way to know the difference between accommodations and modifications is the green eggs and ham way. So let me see your hands if y'all remember green eggs and ham. Even though I don't promote Dr. Seuss because of his racial issues that he's had in his books. And I don't support Maria Montessori either because, she had some racial stuff too. Oh yeah, I'll send you out an article if you haven't looked at it. But that's a whole nother, I'm coming off of that. I'm back on the accommodations and modifications. So in the book, you'll see this guy named Sam I Am, and he's being entertained by this something, right? There's like a protagonist, and then there's this guy. And he's trying to get the protagonist to eat 2 eggs and ham, green eggs and ham. So he says, do you want to eat them in the rain? Do you want to eat them on a bus? Do you want to eat them with fists on? Do you want to Those are all accommodations. Why are they accommodations? Because the goal does not change. If the goal is we're going to eat 2 eggs and ham, once how you do it doesn't matter. Whether it's you eat it, over the span of 2 or 3 hours, whether you can eat it by yourself in a room, whether you can eat it with preferential seating next to the teacher, whatever we need to do for you to eat those 2 eggs and ham, as long as the goal is met, those are all accommodations, When it's a modification, you're now saying, okay, you don't have to eat 2 eggs. You can just eat 1 egg and just a little bit of the ham. So you've modified the goal, So if the goal is the same throughout, and you're doing little things like giving extra time or giving preferential seating or giving, they could eat the eggs and ham with glasses on. They could, with music in the background. As long as the goal is met, those are all accommodations. When the goal changes and you start to reduce the goal or change the goal, again, only 1 ham. You don't even have to eat the egg, just eat the ham. That's modification. You modified, you made a difference in the goal. And so that's my go-to of like, how do you know the difference between accommodations and modifications? If the goal is still intact from the beginning to the end, you're giving accommodations. So even if it's like, do you want to eat the green eggs and ham on a computer? Do you want to eat as long as the goal is intact, those are all accommodations. When the goal changes, then you've modified it. And that's what a modification is. Any questions on the difference between accommodations and modifications? Simple, right? Good. If you can't explain it simply, and this is a good note to you all, as you're talking to parents, as you're talking to legal guardians, as you're talking to anybody, if you can't explain it that simply, you need to go back and learn it more. Figure out a different way to express it. You got to figure out a different way to express it, primarily because if you don't, what's going to end up happening is confusion. And then you start talking about, I don't, accommodation is the same thing. It's not the same thing. They're very different things. And again, especially in special education, our North Star are the students' goals. And so if they say like, the student has to get 4 out of 5 multiplication things right. That's the goal. The kid has to meet that goal. And then again, when you modify something, the goal changes. But again, you don't want to modify to the extent possible. You don't want to modify primarily because if the goal keeps on changing for Brandon and not his typically aged peers, he's never going to be at the same level or even close to it because you've kept on changing his goals. You kept on changing the goals. And so you really want to make sure that you try to employ as many accommodations before you start modifying the goal. Here's some commonly used accommodations in special education. There's presentation accommodations and there's response. There's a lot, and I'll show you more. But in the chat box, are there any presentation accommodations or response accommodations that you have heard of or that you have used? I really want you to look at this list so that you can start thinking about the things that you can be doing in terms of accommodation. Or maybe you've used some of them and you didn't even have a disability, or maybe you do and you don't have to disclose, but maybe there's something that you've used. Let me see. Multiple choice rather than open-ended. That's a great accommodation. And that's a response accommodation. Go ahead, take your time and start typing in the chat box. Extended time, that's a good one. Sometimes you just need a little bit more time. I've used graphic organizers through and through. That's like the accommodation for everything for me. I need a graphic organizer. I need to map it out, even with my dissertation. A visual schedule, very good in the class. And again, it prevents that student who might be classified as emotionally disturbance, especially if they have high anxiety and they're always wondering what time is lunch? What time is this? What time? You can just have a schedule right there to alleviate some of that. Highlight, I always highlight, even right now when I help students like read papers and stuff like that, I'm huge on highlighting. And then we do love a good oral response instead of written. Here are some commonly used accommodations in special education for setting, for timing and scheduling, and for organizational supports. Again, in the chat box, I want you to type some that you may have used, may have seen, may have heard about. We have preferential seating, which is a big one. Testing in a quiet room, which is big, reduces distraction. Proximity to teacher, noise canceling headphone. I just saw that not too long ago. Extended time, frequent breaks, flexible deadlines, preview of lesson materials before class, like flipping the classroom. Organizational supports like planners, color-coded folders. We do like a good chunk long-term projects, and that kind of falls under task analysis, and I'll talk about that later. Very good, very good. So again, there's no nice, very good. And to your point, accommodations, especially if they're for a student with a disability, great, great. However, and I'll talk a little bit more about this around the Universal Design for Learning chat that we'll be having probably the next time I see you next Tuesday. But I think it's super important that you remember that what you do for a student with disability, you can replicate it and do for another kid in general education setting. And so say if you created a specially designed graphic organizer for Johnny, you can take that specially designed graphic organizer and give it to other students who it might help. And so again, just because the specially designed instruction is in fact for that one particular child. However, you can replicate it and give it to other kids. So it lessens the ostracizing of that student, but more importantly, it gives other kids an opportunity to have an accommodation that they need, whether they've been diagnosed or not diagnosed. A lot of kids benefit, many kids benefit from the things and the services that we give to students with disabilities. There's more. And that's why there's behavioral and self-regulation supports, there's communication supports, there's sensory supports. This is why whenever I'm in an IEP meeting, especially when I was at the state, but just anytime I'm working with special educators, paraprofessionals, when they say, I've tried everything, I said, there's no way in the world you try. I have 5,000 slides of things that you could be trying for kids. So please spare me that. No, you haven't tried everything. You've tried behavior cue cards. You've tried positive reinforcement systems. You've tried timers for tasks. And you've tried nonverbal cues from teachers. That's what you've tried. But all this like, well, I've tried everything. That doesn't sit well with me because I know that's not true. Especially when I say, well, let me see your progress monitoring. Let me see your data collection around scheduled movement breaks. Or let me see your calm down tools, progress monitoring. You've had to have written down when you gave this child something, what they did with it, and how well did it go. And then they just get quiet. And then I give them the fine. I just pay it. Let's get out of here so I can go to lunch. But it's really important that you recognize and understand that there are, and this is a short list. This is a short list. There's so many accommodations that we use in special education. And as long as you don't change the goal and you think about what the student needs in order for them to be successful, you can create your own accommodation. Nice. I like that. I need a behavioral chart sometimes. Even to this point in my life, I'd be ready to go off on folks too often, too fast, especially in crowded areas. Any questions about these commonly used accommodations? I'm going to save this conversation for next time. So we'll talk about Universal Design for Learning and next Tuesday, because it's a bigger conversation and I don't want to start that without talking a little bit more through the class and the class work. So real quick, this is what I do I try to do this every single class. I'm in your share. We have to make sure that where am I here? Yeah, share. Thumbs up if you can see like the Blackboard screen. Perfect. So we've already done moves through the course. We've already done special education syllabus. We've already showed you the Zoom links for Tuesday evening class. And again, even if you don't get the announcements Tuesday morning, the links will be here for our Tuesday evening class. So you kind of look at this. Oh Lord. You look at this, you kind of go week by week and you see what we're going to be talking about. Week 1, module 1, that stuff should already be submitted of sorts. Oh, and this is a caveat that I'm going to be sharing with this class and this class only. Because there's so few students, you don't have to respond to 2. Just make sure you respond to at least 1 when you have to respond. So don't worry about 2, just respond to 1. And then week 2, module 2, again, some of the links I've learned from the other class that some of the links, when I don't want to make excuses, but this Blackboard Ultra is much different than Blackboard, the older one that we just left. So sometimes the links work, sometimes they don't work. But long story short, they all work for me. But if they don't work for you, make sure you email me or call me. But I will also say, if you have the citation, if you copy and paste the citation into Google Scholar or Montgomery College's library search engine, you should get the PDF popped up for you. If it's still not working, then reach out to me. But with the citation, you can just go to Google Scholar and pick it up. I want you to review all of these fun things. Yep, all these fun things. And I also want you to, if you didn't get to all the week 1, module 1 stuff, go ahead and make sure you do that because you're going to need it for something in about 2 or 3 weeks. But this is the discussion board number 2. And I'm very serious about writing. And so I gave you an APA writing tip sheet. So make sure that you follow, this is the APA style writing class. Education is APA. I'm so concerned about your writing primarily because when you write IEPs, those are legal documents that can go to court. And so it's really important that you get your writing precise, you get your writing thoughtful, you don't make grammar errors and mechanical errors because it says more about you and your practice than it will about the field for sure. Now, this is your discussion board post number 2. You need access to IDEA, which is right here. I talked about the disability categories. So you're going to pick one of those disability categories and you're going to choose which category is interesting to you. How would you support students, families, and colleagues, etc.? What are the supports and interventions? And you can use those accommodations too to help build this workup for you if you want to. How would you assist a student who has a disability category you found interesting? And again, my expectation is you think about that laundry list of accommodations and embed some of that into some of this. So some of you might have to go back and do some revisions. If you caught it, great. If you didn't, I really want to make sure that you are utilizing the research and the resources that have been curated in this class to support your writing, especially for discussion.
Yeah, I'm sure you're probably wondering like why I was like losing my mind last week. I was sick, but then I also the reason why you see the assignment is done there is because I'm taking another course, and that course is in a week. So we are in week 2, sorry. So that course is in week 3, and this course is in week 2. And I don't know why, I just thought this course was in week 3. So
No, you're fine. I never think,
even though
let me
I'd
tell you
done the
something.
week 2 stuff, I was like, oh my gosh, it's probably week 3 and I'm behind.
When it comes to my students, I never wonder why y'all losing your minds. So that's number 1. Number 2, I'd rather have it before than after, because again, after doesn't work in this class. If you look at the syllabus, there's only one time for you to either don't do something or don't do something well. But I don't do all this like, oh, I forgot, because, and this is how I really treat my special education classes. You have to meet your deadlines. You have to meet, in certain school districts, you'll have 10 days to do something. You have 30 days to do this. You have 20 days to do this. And there are no, oh, my cat got sick, so I had to stay home and do. That's not a legal reason. And a judge is not going to stand for it. A judge is not going to stand for it. And so I'm super strict on deadlines and due dates in this class, primarily because I want you to get into the habit of being a special educator. So I hope that that's kind of clear. So there's that. But that's your work for this week coming up. But also, I want you to preview week 3 because your special education landmark case analysis will be due. I think that this is the broken link. Yep. So the other, Lord, none of them work.
I think one of them works, actually.
Let's see.
It's just, I think from what I remember, it was
Well,
one.
don't work. Again, I usually spend, before I upload stuff, I usually spend some considerable amount of time clicking the links and by tomorrow. This is a really good piece. This is why I give multiple links, because if one doesn't work, there's always some backups. But I will make sure that I give we sue lawyers. Special education can be super litigious, especially if you're in DC. But that's neither here nor there. So link 1 doesn't work. Link 2 and 3 does work. And you really just need this page, actually. So I'll actually go back and just erase that first link, because as long as you have the 2, that's plenty. And more importantly, if you want to do your own research and find special education court cases, not Judge Judy cases where the dog bit the lady and you just want to write about that foolishness. Hold on for one quick second. Hello, I got you right back. I'm in class.
Oh, okay.
All righty. Zora upstairs acting crazy. But long story short, the last 2 work. The first one I'll just delete and I'll replace it with something else. But essentially, if you want to do your own research on special education cases throughout the country, by all means, go ahead. But just make sure it is centered on special education. This is a special education class. Any questions? And again, I do want you to get to the work. So with the remaining balance of time, I'm going to give it back to you to make sure that you can actually synthesize what I'm asking you to do, because essentially there's a through line. If you think about the things that I asked you about disproportionality and just like justice with the first piece, and then this week's piece really underscores this idea of finding a disability category, declaring your interest for it, answering some specific questions. And then the next week's piece is how law really does dovetail into the work that we have to do with special education. There's always going to be a through line, always a through line to my stuff. The last thing I'll say is make sure you have resources. I don't want you to just go with your feelings and how you feel. I want APA references, in-text citations to the work that you're going to be sharing and giving with everything. You can never cite enough in this class. You can never cite enough in this class, especially when it comes to corroborating or supporting the instructional moves or shifts you're going to take as educators. Any questions on the assignments? Any questions on the work? All right, well, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stop the recording, but I'm going to stick around for a little while until everybody's gone. How do you stop?